Mawa, the Mawa government has the audacity to try to lie and say that we are disobeying the law when they themselves are disobeying the law, and they are acting, as Chief Perry has said, as vigilantes. They are just showing that they're nothing more than gangsters at the end of the day. They're nothing more than gangsters. And they think they can keep on oppressing us. They think they can keep on messing with my tribe, and they can't do it. They keep taking us to court, and they keep losing because we have the Creator on our side.
Peace, everyone. My name is Mumsahana Ansari, and I am the mother of Muriyd Two Clouds Williams, who you just saw in the clip speaking about the Mahwah, New Jersey government, as well as the Mahwah Police Department, and how he regarded them as vigilantes and gangsters. And that particular interview took place in, I believe it was 2018. And just a handful of years later, in 2022, on July 3rd, my son went missing. And days later, on July 6th, his body was found. And I started to learn even more firsthand, as he did, that the Mahwah government and police department are indeed vigilantes and gangsters. And so I want to touch on some things in this video. I haven't made a video in sort of a long time. And I wanted to bring some things up to speed, update some things. I have been investigating this murder since it happened, or since I found out it happened on July 6th. I began making videos immediately on the land where my son's body was said to have been found. And thank goodness that I did start doing that, because it proved itself very, very handy. And so, you know, I've been investigating this myself because no one will help. No one will help, no agencies or anything like that. Not American agencies, no indigenous agencies. And that includes those that exist as organizations that are supposed to protect missing and murdered indigenous people, and especially land offenders and such. So a little bit about me. I have been doing pro se work for about 3 decades now, successfully. And so this is sort of what I do. It's like kind of par for the course. And this is why Two Clouds was so good at what he did, is he sort of came up in this sort of a way. And so information that I have gotten myriad ways, but some of the most important is has been through the Oprah, which allows you to request actual official documentation from governmental agencies. I've been doing a very strong letter writing campaign through, you know, airmail as well as email. I have I just have all sorts of things, which is only by the will and the grace of the Creator that these things have been able to be obtained. But suffice to say, this is why I know what I know. And so what I want to give to you is just a few things, particularly about police involvement. So as I said on July 3rd, my son went missing. Around June 17th of that year, 2022, Daniel Strongwalker Thomas had shown up to the very land where my son's body had been found at 95 Halifax Road in Mahwah, New Jersey. That is, has been deemed the religious land of the Ramapo Munsee Lenape people, who are also known as Ramapo Mountain Indians, Inc. And it is the first parcel of land that my son secured for the Ramapo. And I say secure because they owned it already, because the land developer who owned all that land, 400 and something acres, that particular parcel of land, it floods. It's a flood zone. So they couldn't, build homes on it as they did much of the other land there. Totally surrounding that parcel, which is approximately 13.9, approximately 14 acres of land that belonged to the Ramapos. It was given to them by the developer, Charles Elmes, ELMES. He gave that land to them because, again, they couldn't develop any housing on it. And so he gave it to the Ramapo out of the goodness of his heart, as, I don't know how to say. So far as he was concerned, out of the goodness of his heart, it seems. He seems to be a goodwill individual. And I just stumbled upon that description because the reality is none of the land actually belongs to anyone other than Ramapo. But he gave that land to them. Surrounding that land is a bunch of, $1 million mansions. And, they exist in a grouping of, it's called the Mahwah Polo and Hunt Club. I'm just talking off the cuff, y'all, so I'm stumbling. This is not scripted. So anyway, Daniel Strongwalker Thomas came up there because he, at the time, was the head of CPAIN, which is a movement that was introduced by the Oklahoma Lenape, or the Delaware Indians of Oklahoma, who were pushed out of the region where the Ramapos still live. And so they believe that other Lenape people who did not move, who did not basically allow themselves to be bullied and pushed out to the Midwest, they believe that all those indigenous people who say they are Lenape, that they are liars and that they are impersonators. And so this guy, Daniel Strongwalker Thomas, who according to the Oklahoma seems to be himself an imposter, he came there to that land around June 17th, 2022 to attempt to bully the Ramapo Indians. And it just so happened a couple of weeks before, my son, Two Clouds, had been elected as tribal war chief. And so it was left up to him to figure this thing out and get this guy Strongwalker off their backs once and for all, because his confidence was escalating. And I have since found out just why it was escalating. Unfortunately, my son did not know this at the time. None of us knew why at the time. Smiling faces. And so, my son had been told by one Shanae Bullock of the Shinnecock that she had put together a meeting of chiefs up in New England, Mashpee, for my son to go up there and speak to some Indian chiefs up there to try to garner support against this guy, Strongwalker Thomas. And so on July 1st, which was the weekend, of course, of Independence Day, July 2022, my son, believing that there was actually a meeting happening up there, drove up there to Mashpee. And on a regular day that is not holiday weekend, it takes 4 hours, just one way to drive up there. And so, of course, when he got there, he realized that he had been hoodwinked and bamboozled. And, you know, he was really torn apart because all the people who were involved were people who claimed to be for indigenous rights, for indigenous people. They claimed to be indigenous activists, and like all of them. And, you know, he was finding out more and more that it just was not so. And so the last couple of days of his life, he was just as he normally was, in seclusion, just to stay to himself. We know from his Instagram posts that he was in that Friday he spent time, after he went to the powwow a little bit, he spent time in the woods by himself, and just as he always did, sort of contemplated, you know, life and creator and creation. Then the following day, he, on his way back to New Jersey, he went to the Pequot Museum up there, and he made a post there at the museum. And so that afternoon, as he was driving back down, he was on a phone call with one of his good friends. And according to a post that friend put on Facebook the day after everyone learned about the death of my son, he put a post on Facebook saying that my son had been going on and on to him that he believed he was going to be murdered. And, you know, when I met this friend 2 days after my son's funeral, it was made clear to me who my son was adamant was out to get him. And so that has turned out to be true. And it is an indigenous person. So that happened. And so he made his way back to Jersey that afternoon. I have text messages and all those sorts of things. And so he had decided that he was leaving the Ramapo and he was not going to be dealing with them anymore, because he decided that they just really had no love for him, that they did not respect him, that they did not really have goodwill for him. And that was, you know, just overall. There may be, you know, individuals here and there who loved him or whatever, of course. But on a whole, he believed that they did not. And first and foremost, that was true of the tribal government proper, the government per se. And again, these things have turned out to be very sadly, very hurtfully, and very enragingly true. So that was Saturday afternoon into the evening. And so by morning, and understand I'm not going into great detail because I do plan to have all these people in front of a judge soon to ensure that they all, at the very least, get life in prison for the murder of my son. If New Jersey had a death penalty, I would for sure be going for the death penalty. I am an eye for an eye. So the only reason that Tu was in town was because he had been anticipating for weeks taking his toddler son to this children's birthday party. He's really excited about it because he was going to get to spend time with his son in, you know, such an environment. As I've specified in other videos, there was a lot of issues with him as well as my family overall being able to see his son until, you know, not long before, less than a year before. And so he was really excited that he had sort of been promoted to this, you know, to being able to be with his son, you know, at his children's birthday party. He was just like souped, and it's really cute to see, actually. And so that's the only reason he was in town. He was supposed to be going, taking his son to this party July 3rd. And so the morning of July 3rd, we have text messages and such between he and the mom. He reached out very early in the morning. He wanted to actually go to be with his son earlier than anticipated, or earlier than, you know, the party. And so he wasn't able to. And so, like on the mom's part, basically, that's a whole issue. But he wasn't able to, and so he just sort of hung back. We have digital proof that he was at the of where he was and what was going on. We have digital proof of his last conversations with people through text message. We know where he was. We know what was happening with him up until the time that he went silent, which was right before noon, July 3rd. So no one could get in contact with him. Not only did he not meet up with his son's mother to pick up his son, even though they had been in constant contact throughout the morning. He did not pick him up. He did not contact the mother. He did not respond to any of her text messages, and she couldn't get through to him through his phone. Other people that he was supposed to meet up with, it was the same thing. There were things that he had planned after the birthday party with people that he did not do. He never contacted them. He never read their text messages or anything. And this was so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday is when we all got the information that he was found dead. Enter the Muriyd Police Department. The whole point of this video, right? So, according to the Muriyd Police Department's operation report, which incidentally is open for anyone to get. It's not just something that the family can get our hands on. It's free information for the public. So, according to the Muriyd Police Department operation report, which is the report that documented, allegedly, what happened with them, with this incident of them coming upon this dead body, again, at 95 Halifax Road in Muriyd, New Jersey. And so the operations report is time-stamped 10:53 in the morning. And the officer states that he was dispatched to that land, and that when he got there, there were two O&R workers. O&R is the electric company for the area. That there were two workers there on the land who met him and who gave him the statement of what happened. So that they said that they were doing work on the street side, the Polo Club side, I suppose. They were doing work there, and then they took their lunch. Now, mind you, this is pretty early in the morning for lunch, but we're just going to go with the narrative for now. That the O&R workers stated they were doing their work. They decided to take their lunch, and in doing that, they decided to just walk across the land there. At the time, there were 2 openings on the land. Now there are no openings, but there were 2 openings on the land, and you could just walk through, right? And it's very beautiful. It's a very beautiful area. And so that they were walking, and then they got a scent, and then, that they thought was a dead goose, and that immediately they saw an overturned boat. Then they saw an overturned boat, and then immediately saw a dead body not far from it. Problem. Creator being who Creator is, we actually have a video of someone who also walked that land just a day or 2 before and recorded it. There was nobody in sight. There was nobody near the boat. There was nobody along the shoreline, and there was no odor. During that time of year, because I do have proof of the weather for the entire month of July for Mahwah, New Jersey, but during that time, the weather was very pleasant. It was very warm outside. It was in the 80s, and there would have assuredly been a stench on the air if there had been a body there decomposing. There were also 4 witnesses at separate times who all said they saw a boat. None of them have said that they saw a body, or they said explicitly that they did not see a body, nor did any of them report a smell or anything. And also, let me say too, just in case some people would think that, well, maybe he was submerged in the water and then came up later. That water is very, very shallow. You can literally walk across that water. So that would not have been possible. It's not very deep at all. And in fact, my son used to wade through the water sometimes. But the most, so the officer gets this supposed information from these 2 men who said they stumbled upon a body. The officer goes on to say that he himself walked over and he saw a body prone in the water, so face down in the water, that was gray and bloated. First stage, you can't tell if a body is gray or bloated, face down in the water. But there are so many other things about this fraudulent operations report. First and foremost, there was no call that came in from any civilian of any type, electric workers or not. I have that because, again, I have the 911 transcripts, and also I wrote and asked specifically, was there anyone, any civilians or anyone who called this in, and they told me explicitly, no one called in, and that there was no transcript for any callers calling in. So we have the police themselves calling in the finding of this dead body in water, according to them. But there is no record of how they got this information. For 2 minutes after they got the call from law enforcement called back and said this was a drowning. This was before any forensic or medical assessment had been done. And then, I forget the exact time right now, but about 80 minutes or so later, I think, is when they called back in again saying like, oh yeah, well, there's nothing to see here. We're not going to do an investigation. Again, before any forensic or medical assessment had been done. Also, they were there with my son's body well into the afternoon. They were supposed to have called the New Jersey State Troopers Marine Division immediately. They waited until about 4:30 to do that. Also, everything that was happening around that time was absolutely against protocol. So they removed my son's body. They had EMT call into the local hospital to have a doctor, how do you say? I can't think of the word, but state that my son, that this was a dead body that was found there over the phone. He didn't see anything or anything like that over the phone. Again, they never called the Marine Division. All these things happen before they even call the the medical examiner, forensic investigator, which absolutely goes against the New Jersey statute 26(6)(b). They're not supposed to, when a body is found, not only in water, but in any situation where there's possibly foul play, they're not allowed to touch that body. All they are supposed to do is call the medical examiner. And they did everything. They moved the body. They did their own, allegedly, the sheriff department did their own scene photos, which they are hell-bent on me not getting, but I will be getting them. So all these things happen before they even call the medical examiner investigator. But to look at the body, is very easily, just for someone like me, a regular old person, you can look at the body and tell that body had not been in water for any significant amount of time. The body was not gray or pale. The body was not bloated. Also, it was very clear that there was possible foul play involved. So I have a couple of pictures that I've made public long ago that you can go on our blog, beyond-clouds.org/blog, and you can see them yourself. There are also like a video or two out here that has photos of my son's body. Nothing too explicit, but just enough to let the people see. So there's very clearly blood flowing from each of his eyes to the back of his head, making it very clear that he was on his back. And that something happened to him. This eye is obliterated. This eye is bulging out. Part of this ear is missing. This full ear is missing, but it is very clearly a clean cut. There's no blood. There's no nothing like that. The face here is ravaged, I can say, for lack of a better word right now. And the Bergen County medical examiner, who I'll get to again later, I have a video where I go into him because I'm having him investigated for fraud. According to him, when I spoke to him and questioned him myself, he told me, actually, the autopsy itself says that my son had been eaten about animals around his face. Well, I'll say this, animals have not been taught proper eating etiquette. So if an animal is going to eat you, it's not going to be focused just on this area. There would be marks at least elsewhere, somewhere on your body or somewhere else about the face, proving that, okay, this looks like an animal has attacked this body. Not so. Also, as I said, there's just physical proof, just outward proof, seeing his body there on the ground when they took him out. All these things should have been obvious. But he did not, it was obvious he was not in water for any significant amount of time. It was obvious that there was foul play involved, if only because of the blood flowing backward. That is not what happens if someone, according to their narrative, someone who fell out of a boat and drowned. Also, his body was not in the typical drowning position. His arms were at his side. The back of him, his shirt was ripped in 3 different areas. Just all these things were happening. So back to the police department. It was clear again, because they documented it, that long before they even left my son's body, they had decided that there was going to be no investigation into this, which is, again, nuts, because protocol says that if police find a body in or near water, that they have to do an investigation to rule out foul play. Very possible and common, in fact, that people are murdered elsewhere and then dumped in water, which is what happened here. And so it's clear from all the documentation, those things and others that I have, that again are official documentation. I know a lot of people, Ramapo people particularly, like to say that I'm making things up in my mind because I'm a grieving mother and all that sort of thing. It was not I who documented all this information. It's just me who was going out there and getting it. But they not only decided to not investigate, there are very clearly cameras that are at the entrance and exit of the property that they never looked at. They never assessed. They never questioned anyone, including me. They never asked a single question pertaining to any possibilities of anything. And this, in them knowing my son very well, they're very familiar with my son in Mawa because of all the work that he had done through litigation, through news interviews, through just standing up to them face to face. So everyone knew very well about who my son was. Also, the New Jersey State Troopers Marine Division documented again. So because Mawa Police Department and Bergen County Sheriff's Department, because they went against protocol, took my son's body out, was doing creator knows what for all those hours throughout the morning and until I think it was like 4:20 exact, 4:20, 4:21 exact, when they finally reached out to State Troopers Marine Division. Only creator can, and the people who were there can actually say what was happening while they were with my son's body for so long. But they finally reached out to the State Troopers. Once they got there, there was no investigation for them to do because Bergen County had already done all these things for X amount of hours. And so the only information that the State Troopers could get was what they gave them. And so the State Troopers, though, made it a point to recategorize the incident that they came upon because they did not see evidence that there had been a boat accident. Now, I got this information myself from the State Trooper when I spoke to him, you know, back then, July 2022, but it's also documented proof. Again, all these things people can get themselves. It's not just something that, you know, I'm privy to. So, you know, that stuff was happening. So, and also when I spoke with the medical examiner, forensic investigator, there's two different MEs I'm talking about here. So there's the forensic investigator, but then there is the ME who actually does the autopsy. So there's two different MEs that work at the same Bergen County office. And so the forensic investigator, when I spoke to him that day after no law enforcement or anyone contacted me, Ramapo, nobody from the Ramapo contacted me, the tribal secretaries nor anyone, the tribal chief, nobody contacted me. My grandson's mother texted my daughter, is how I got the information. And then I called the mother myself, and, you know, she answered the phone crying, and I was like, okay. And so as I'm driving down there, which I stated in another video, the mother took it upon herself to contact the medical examiner's office. She didn't call me and like get permission or say, hey, here's the number, or she didn't call them and say, this is the mother's number. It was none of that. She was talking to him, and what I'm supposing is that he would not give her information because she was not next of kin. And so she called me on a three-way again. Didn't give him my phone number for him to call me. I've said before, I have big problems with several of them getting in the way, being nosy, and just making advances that they had no right to do. Of course, they've been absolutely quiet since, not trying to help at all, including not even sharing a video or a Justice for Two Clause hashtag or anything. But at the time, she called me on a three-way with the forensic investigator, the ME forensic investigator. And he, thankfully, kept pushing me to have an autopsy done. So what I believe, and it would make total sense because this guy is an investigator, so I believe that he knew just from looking at my son's body, this is not a drowning incident. There's foul play involved. There needs to be an investigation. And so, you know, getting back to Mahwah Police Department and also the Bergen County Sheriff's Department, there's no evidence anywhere that they ever checked the cameras that were there, very prominently displayed at the entrance and exit of the property. There's no evidence that they ever called the property owners. So you tell me, if a dead body who is by all intents and purposes a prominent figure locally, he's found dead on someone's property, of course they will call the property owner and say, hey, we need you to come down here because there's an incident. We found a body dead here. There is no evidence whatsoever that they ever contacted the Ramapo tribal office. I've asked, they told me, the women, the secretaries there told me they never heard from Mahwah Police Department at all. There's no evidence that they ever contacted Mahwah, anyone, I keep saying Mahwah, the Ramapo tribal government, and there's no evidence that they ever contacted Chief Dwayne Perry, which is quite telling. Lots of times you could find out things that people say or do that doesn't add up, but many times you can also put two and two together by things that are not said or done. They never once mentioned contacting Chief Dwayne Perry. Why is that significant? Well, for obvious reasons, right? But also that very afternoon, as I was driving down, I got the information around 4:30-ish that day, July 6th. I immediately started calling significant people in our family and our friend group. And one of those people who I called immediately hung up from me and called Dwayne Perry. And he stated that Dwayne Perry immediately started telling him that Two Clouds had been drunk and he fell out of his boat and drowned. So various questions are, prompted from that. One, how would he know what happened if he was not there and if he did not know anybody who was there? How would he know if there had been no medical examination, no assessment done, no autopsy, no anything? How would he know that this happened? Also, the following day, also let me say again, he never calls me at all that day. Not one time did he call me and say, I'm very sorry for the loss of what happened to Two Clouds. If there's anything that we can do for you, like not even if there's anything we can do. What can we do? Should have been the question. But there was silence. There was complete silence. As I've said in an article, maybe a video, I don't know, he did call me the next day, right when I was dealing with my son's funeral arrangements. And at that point, I didn't want to talk to him because I already knew that Two Clouds and he had been in they had big beef for months and months and months, for various reasons. And having to do with land, my son told me that he and the tribal council wanted to start selling off the land. And my son was the only one that was blocking that. But also Perry's cousin, Deke DeFries, stole $33,000 worth of product from the smoke shop that my son had been forced into managing by Roger Jock, who is one of the Mohawk elders up there, Akwesasne. And Jock and some of his people had invested tens of thousands of dollars, well over $100,000 into this smoke shop that Deke had stolen all this product from. And so Two Clouds had been in heated exchange with not just Perry, but the entire tribal government over this because they refused to follow the Constitution, the tribal Constitution, and deal with Deke appropriately. I have another video on that too. Read with Envy Part 2. Read with Envy being the series that I'm doing, breaking down certain information bit by bit, having to do with this whole thing. Because it's not complicated, but it's complex. And it's all the usual stuff. Greed, envy, jealousy, money, power, land, all that sort of thing. And so, no one had reached out or any of that sort of thing. And so, Perry had begun that day and pushing forward this narrative about Two, that he had been drunk and that he fell out of his canoe. Now, I have yet another video that I called the manufacturer, the canoe manufacturer, who made Two Clouds' canoe. Is a 16-foot Mad River canoe, the Explorer series. And I have the representative on camera saying that boat would not have flipped over if someone fell out of it. Now, it wouldn't flip over on class 3 white water, which is what is made for. It is specifically made to, you know, whitewater rafting where there's like all these waves, you know, smashing against boats and everything. But also the boats will be smashing against, you know, underwater debris and all this sort of thing. It is made to sustain 1,000, I think actually it's 1,100 pounds of weight, and to not flip over. So we're talking about this boat, my son's canoe, is on this still water, which they say is Ramapo River, but it's not actually the river proper. It's actually overflow water that comes in. It's like a nice size like pond or, you know, ravine or what have you. And it's still, and as I said earlier, it's shallow water that you can actually wade through. And so what would be the cause? Let's just say for shits and giggles that 2 clouds fell out of the boat. There would be no cause for the boat itself to flip over. He just would have fallen out of the boat. And because the water was not deep at all, he just simply would have stood up. And we knew this firsthand because when he very first came there on the land back in 2016, you know, he didn't know the water and things. And he, you know, was on the water and he fell out of a boat and he flipped out because he thought he was going to drown or whatever, because he was thinking it was the river itself, you know. And we used to laugh about it because the guys he was with like told him like, just stand up. So he stood up, and we used to get a kick out of it because he had to buy a new phone and everything, and he felt just goofy because he's like, I legit messed up my phone and all I had to do was stand up. And so and that was years before. There are plenty of videos, there's a newspaper article, there's like plenty of evidence that he had become very skilled on that water, and he knew that if he had ever fallen in, you just stand up. But here was a 16-foot canoe that is made to not flip over, even holding up to 1,100 pounds on white water, flipped over in shallow, still water. Who flipped it? Who flipped it? How many people flipped it? Why did they flip it? Oh, the questions. So the other thing with Dwayne Perry is that, you know, aside from him starting these rumors the very afternoon, again, so even if he knows that 2 clouds is down there dead, and of course, again, he never contacted next of kin, who is me, how would he know? So there's no documentation that the police department ever contacted him. How did he know? Who told him? Who told him 2 clouds was still dead? Who told him that 2 clouds had been drinking and fallen out of the boat? See, many times it's very, very simple, and it's right in people's faces. But instead of anyone saying like, well, how would he know if he wasn't there? That's not what they've done these past 3.5 years. They've just been regurgitating this false information because it's easier for them. In order for you to say that we actually know and love people who plotted against someone who actually helped us, unlike anybody has ever helped us before, they actually murdered him and staged it and kept it moving. Not only would they have to contend with the fact that they are affiliated with people like that, but that they are also complicit and compliant in the cover-up of this murder. And so rather than people doing that, and because they also don't have the courage to stand up, which again is why my son at 24 years old had to come up there and do the work that grown men had never even attempted to do. Instead of dealing with all those things and looking at themselves and saying, okay, what's really going on here? They would much rather say, slanderous, you know, words and statements about my son. But the truth is, very obviously, the truth. And so by the next day, Dwayne Perry had actually put together this letter, this fraudulent letter that I've talked about many times before. And in the letter, he lied, saying that I was on board with him sending it and with him asking for a complete forensic investigation and to have the report sent to him. All of these things are untrue. I'm sure y'all know me by now. I don't need anybody to speak for me for any reason, especially when it comes to my children. And so, especially with the person that I knew so much about that had venom for my son. And so, he sent this letter not to the Mahwah Police Department, not to Bergen County Sheriff's Department, not to the FBI, as he said to me when I called him on the 10th, that, you know, he could put in a report for me if I wanted him to the FBI and all this kind of stuff. None of that. He did none of that. Who did he send it to? He sent it to the medical examiner, the examiner who was going to perform the autopsy. If, you know, he was trying to make that happen, but I had not spoken to him and I had not spoken with that medical examiner. So he sent this letter, and in the letter he gave several reasonings of why perhaps Two Clouds had been found dead. And so he said that he never mentioned drink. First of all, let's make that clear. He never mentioned anything about, oh, you know, he was an alcoholic or something like that, and that, you know, like I have on good authority or whatever that he was drinking and found. It was nothing. He didn't even mention alcohol at all in this letter. He said that as far as and even the way that he worded information, his statements, he said as far as he knew that Two Clouds couldn't swim very well, which is not true, incidentally. He said that he believed that Two Clouds had had a heart attack the year before because Two Clouds told him he had been to the emergency room. Not that Two Clouds told him he had a heart attack, but Two Clouds told him he had been to the emergency room. And as I've said in the past, my son had been diagnosed with chronic anxiety, so he would have chest pain sometimes, as several people in my family suffer and have been diagnosed medically with chronic anxiety, and they suffer the same. Also, again, I am a longtime nurse, so I was able to tell him, like, no, this is what happened. This is what it feels like. But Perry in the letter made an insinuating statement that could have been a reason why my son had been found dead. He also mentioned Strong Walker, that this guy came up there who is in a habit of making threats, and he came up there making threats just, you know, a few weeks before. And he also said in this letter that he had, because of that he had filed, I think, criminal and civil complaints against this guy, Strong Walker Thomas. And then I think the other two had to do with the people that live in that area, the million of people who were there, and how, you know, Two Clouds used to have, at the Ramapo, but specifically Two Clouds used to have run-ins with them that were very, you know, threatening and malicious. And he made mention to an affidavit that has been on file since 2018 that my son, in his own words, told the things that had been happening to him as he fought for that very parcel of land, 95 Halifax Road. And so out of that letter, from that letter, the medical examiner totally overlooked what he said about possible foul play. He overlooked all that and went to drowning and said that my son had died from drowning. But again, I'm a long-time nurse, so I was able to read through the documents, read through the lab reports and everything, and realize that there was absolutely zero, and I do mean zero, evidence of drowning of any sort. None. None. And so you have the physical reality and looking at the body, and then you have the actual forensic scientific evidence. Also, with the clothes off, it's very evident that my son had been moved post-mortem because there were various directions of lividity, which is a telltale sign that a body has been moved after death. But the medical examiner decided to lie on official documentation, saying that my son had been, that he had drowned. He didn't mention anything. Not only did he mention nothing about foul play, he also mentioned nothing about any of the very obvious injuries aside from around the face. He didn't mention about the ear being obviously cut off, unless woodland animals have thumbs and know how to use a knife and fork to slice an ear off. That was done at the hands of human beings. He didn't mention any of that kind of stuff. And in fact, he also mentioned that although the cardiology report showed that there was zero wrong with my son's heart, like at all, and that there had never been, that there was no evidence of any past traumas either. So yet again, this very false narrative that people were running with, that he had a heart attack and fell out of his boat and died, and that, oh no, he had a heart attack, he just didn't want to tell you to worry you and all this kind of stuff. The actual evidence proves that there was not anything that happened to his heart to bring upon death, nor had there ever been anything wrong with his heart, like ever in life. But despite this, after that report, the medical examiner puts in parentheses that he had a history of heart attack. And then in the, the results finding at the very end, where they, talk about the what the COD is and everything, he puts in there that he had a history of heart attack and that he drowned. Again, both very evidently did not happen. And so because of that, I am fighting Bergen County medical examiners, the medical examiner board, because they refuse to hold Dr. Zhang accountable, even though the New Jersey State Chief Medical Examiner, who is over them all, has determined on his own, through his own investigation, that there was, quote, the features of drowning cannot be identified. And he also said that the amount of ethanol that was found in his system was due to decomposition. I also had a renowned forensic toxicologist who specializes in alcohol and marijuana deaths. I also had him look at it, and he also said, this is due to decomposition. And also, he showed how, I won't go into it too much because, like I said, I plan to have all of these people in front of a judge to be held accountable. But even the way in which the medical examiner who did the autopsy, even the way that he went about taking samples from my son, he did it in a way where he went with like the weaker route. I'll put it that way. But even going further, so you know, as I said with Dwayne Perry, he did the things he did and was saying the things that he said. The very same day, July 6th, the very same afternoon, the guy who threw a tribal coup was placed as Wolf Clan sub-chief Pete DeGroat. He also was making it a point that very afternoon to say that my son had a heart attack and had fallen out of his boat and had drowned. And he and I, as I've said in other videos and articles, I spoke with him myself that day, and he was adamant trying to convince me that my son had indeed had a heart problem and that he had fallen out the boat and drowned. But again, how could anyone be so adamant about anything if they also claim to not have been there? Like, how do you know? Again, no medical examination had been done, no nothing. But he and Chief Perry both were adamant. Also the same day, Deke DeFries was implying to people that two clouds, this is yet a third narrative that others were trying to push to me. Deke was also pushing to people that two clouds had been acting weird lately, acting funny lately, and implying that he had committed suicide. That is something else also that Pete DeGroat had been trying to push also. The day, I think that same night it was, trying to push that, yeah, you know, he had, he was going through a lot of, you know, emotions about the tribe and that he tried to kill himself. And he told me that if anything ever happens to me, that you're in control of the tribe. Looney Tunes. So all these sorts of things were happening, and thankfully it's all documented. Oh, gracious. You know, it's funny to me that for so many people who claim to believe in the Creator, they don't believe in the Creator at all. It doesn't seem like it. Not only are they so quick to do dirt, they just don't seem to understand that you cannot kill the Creator's plan. You cannot kill a revolution. You cannot kill a movement. You can't. All you can do is sit back and just go along for the ride. Now, you could be on this side or that side. It doesn't really matter because it's going to happen regardless. It didn't start with my son, and it for sure enough did not end with my son. And so, you know, it is what it is.
So, all we're asking for is a non-corrupt
these
council.
people, they're crazy, you know?
All we want is people
what they're doing is crazy.
They're
afraid, they want to play tough. The only advantage that they have over us is that they have money, but in reality, that's not even an advantage that they have. We have the Creator. If you have the Creator, you have creation. What are they going to do?